WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM's Master of Business Administration is designed to accommodate the career needs of professionals across a variety of work organizations. More information at business.udmercy.edu.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Nick Austin. Today on the program, activist, poet, and writer John Sinclair passed away yesterday at age 82. We'll revisit his life and legacy through a conversation he had right here on WDET later in the show.
But first, on the Metro, if you haven't been to Baobab Fare, you should. The Burundi-inspired restaurant offers dishes that are flavorful in a restaurant that is inviting and cozy. And the co-owners of the restaurant have a lot to show for it. Baobab was awarded the Best New Restaurant in America in 2021. It received the Best New Restaurant in Metro Detroit Award in 2022. And it received the State of Michigan Award in 2021 and 2023. Now Baobab is expanding. The owners recently closed on a new location on East Warren Avenue in Detroit. To discuss why Baobab is expanding and when they will open their new location, we have co-founder Nadia Nijimbere here. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So Baobab is a sensational restaurant. I've been. The food is phenomenal. You all have received amazing reviews from so many people here at the station, of course, and across the city of Detroit and the country. Talk to us a little bit about how it got started.
So how we got started, first of all, it was the lack of our food and culture in Detroit, in the area. So when we were like, why not introduce Burundian food, East African in general? And we were like, let's do it. That's when the opportunity started, when with Hatch Detroit. And we are here today as one of the best restaurants
in the city of Detroit, which is a huge feat to accomplish, especially when we hear about the restaurants coming and going and different things like that. How have you all stood out? How do you stand out?
So I would say we are really lucky having the support of the community that we have today. Detroit community, they've been there for us, and we try to make sure we give our best, because they have showed us that they are here for us and we are there for them. So we try to give the food they need, the customer service they need, and the support they need.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think about Burundi or Burundi-inspired restaurants in the area. Like you said, there were none or not many at all serving the cuisine. So what are some high points of the spices and the flavors and different things that go into making the food?
What I can say about our food, it's let's even say from the reviews from our customers, they say, this is food, it's a filling food. You come, saying, okay, I'm just having the spices and then that's it. I'm just having the fried food and then that's it. Like, this is a really comforting food. So when we hear that, we're like, that's what we eat every day. So I'm so happy to feed the community the food that we eat home every single day.
And when I think about that, and you say you're making these foods, this is what you eat every day. This is everyday life for you. And I think about the foods that we eat and grow up eating every single day. How has this inspired or the visitors and the customers to expand their palates and expand the way they cook at home?
So sometimes they say, what do you put in your food? I'm like, I put patience, because our food takes long to cook. You're not in rush. Don't time your food. Just make sure you're studying your food, and then the end. I need well-cooked, well-done food, flavorful. Don't put pressure on the food. We don't put pressure in our food. That's why sometimes when we run out of food, our customer used to say, okay, go cook it. It's going to be quick. I say, no, there is no quick food we have. If we're done, we're done. So we try to put the passion and love in the food we cook at the restaurant, what we eat every day.
I love that so much. So, let's get into the new building that you all purchased on West Warren in Detroit. Why did you both decide to expand Baobab to this particular space?
That particular space, it has a big story for us. It's the space that I would say it needed us. There is no many restaurant there, and the community there is that community which is together, looking for expanding. We had a lot of inquiries including Ann Arbor, and we choose to stay in Detroit. Detroit community need us. So the East Warren, it was the place for us to be, and we were like, okay, it's not far from Detroit. It's not far from the restaurant where we are. People are still like, can you expand? Can you expand? So, okay, let's go a little bit on the east side so we can share our food with the east side.
Yes, I love that's one thing I always talk about. It's just showing love to the east side of Detroit and just making sure that the love is spread across the entire city. I think about what you're saying, you know, like I want to you were needed in that community, in that East Warren community there. I think about the African diaspora, and I think about those flavors and those rich cuisine from Burundi kind of latching on to Detroiters because it's a black city and because so many of us may be familiar with the flavors and we may not know why we're familiar with it. So can you talk about how that is bridging that diaspora, that gap there of Burundi and Detroit?
Yeah, because I would say most of people, they are really good familiar with West African food. Many people before we came, they were like, West African food is African food. No, it's not African food. We have West African food, East African food. There's even North African food. So to introduce our food, it was like people can tell, even if I don't say it, now we'll be like, oh, this is West African food. Because it's good, but it's so spicy. Some people, they'll come at the restaurant and say, is the food spicy? I say, 0 spicy. If you want the spicy, you add it on your own. We're going to give you to add. So our food, East African food, it has given a lot of knowledge to people, food-wise, to know, oh, there is West African food and East African food. The way it's cooked, the way it's flavored, it's a little bit different.
That's the one thing I learned, especially just being at Baobab, is learning the difference between East Africa, just the different regions and different spaces and places and countries within Africa and where the food is and how it looks and how it's created and cooked. I kind of know the difference now because of having you all there and having all the other spaces now. So once again, thank you for expanding that knowledge to Detroiters in the city of Detroit. But I think about the challenges that you all will have expanding to this new location. Do you see anything coming up or arising, any challenges, and how do you see yourself facing them?
I would say there is always challenges, but it's always be ready for the challenges. There is good challenges and bad challenges. We are always ready. We have the support. We know that we don't want to do it on ourselves. We have a good team that is supporting us. If we need help, we ask. There is nothing we can do on our own. We have to ask help for other people. So we know there is a lot of challenges coming up, but we are ready for it.
We are speaking with the co-founder of Baobab Fare, Nadia Nijimbere. And Nadia, I just want to ask you, what kind, or, will the menus be a little different between the two spaces? Are we going to see the same menu, or are we going to switch it up and say, hey, you go to this location, you're going to have this today, or you go to this location, you're going to have that?
I would say 95% is the same menu. We're going to add a little bit because we're going to be having bigger kitchen than what we have right now. We will be having a capacity to add something on the menu. Right now, the kitchen is small. That's why we don't want to overcrowd it.
So I think about, too, the space right now that you have in the New Center area. I think about it being that communal space. So many different events are held and talks and conversations, just all types of things where people are coming together. Talk about how or explain or even express the feeling of having that communal space in New Center and now possibly in East Warren, where you're going to have that, this a place where people can come and chat and eat.
So on the east side, it's more, right now, we don't receive a lot of groups like for the reservation because the space is small. Yeah. On east side, we're going to have a big space where we can have like big parties, like a big table. We can have like 15 people, 16 people. Right now, our max on the new center is just eight people. So it's going to be a little bit different. And then people we feel comfortable. It's going to be a little bit privacy because the chair don't going to be as close as they are right now. I think it's going to be something, if you cannot come at East Side, you can come on a New Center.
Yes. I'm really looking forward to the expansion. I think a lot of us are really looking forward to the expansion. And before I let you go, we have breaking news, which you told me right before you sat down, which is really, really an amazing thing. James Beard nominee for 2024, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. Go ahead and talk about it.
So an hour ago, we just yes, we just learned that we are the nominee for the James Beard Outstanding Restaurateur. It's really big news for us. The 2 last years we've been semi-finalists as a chef. Right now, to be outstanding restaurateur, it's really big, and we are so happy for our community. Being outstanding restaurateur, that means what we do, everybody see it. They don't only like the food, they even like what we do in the community for our staff, for us, the service, everything. We are so grateful. We are so grateful and happy.
Thank you so much for, just once again, I'm just so excited to see the expansion, to see the growth, and to just learn more about Africa, the countries within Africa, the cuisine, and the people that are all bridged together through that diaspora. So thank you so much for being here. Co-founder Nadia Nijimbere is the co-founder of Baobab Fare, expanding to a new location. James Beard nominee, Outstanding Restaurant of the Year. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET, and coming up, yesterday, John Sinclair passed away. We'll listen to a conversation between him and WDET's And Elise, which honors the poet and the activist's life.
Welcome back to the Metro right here on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Nick Austin. And John Sinclair, he was an activist, a poet, and writer whose life and work are connected by the idea of resistance. Well, he passed away yesterday, but while he was living, he impacted a lot of people. During his life, Sinclair co-founded the White Panthers and managed MC5, the rock band, and was sentenced to 10 years in prison for possessing two marijuana cigarettes. His imprisonment famously attracted the support of John Lennon. But that wasn't his only run-in with the law. A CIA conspiracy charge against Sinclair eventually took him to the U.S. Supreme Court, and in a landmark 1972 case, the court unanimously ruled in Sinclair's favor, declaring warrantless wiretapping illegal. WDET's And Elise used to work with John right here at our station, and she spoke with him in 2016 about his life and activism. They began by discussing what he thought of Detroit.
What do you think of Detroit when you look at it today?
It's a wreck. They ruined it. It used to be a great place. Then all these people went to these horrible places called the suburbs. Much lower quality of life, no culture. They have all these economic theorems and all this crap about what made Detroit bad. Basically, they blame the victims. The rich people ruined the city, and then all the middle class and working class white people followed them out of here. And they left this place without a tax base or any jobs, the worst education system you could possibly imagine. You couldn't make this up, as Jim Price would say. You can't make this up. I don't know. I could talk about this for several days, but...
I mean, your history here is quite unique. There are people that live through it, and then there are people that live through it in the way that you did as an activist. And you have these titles attached to your name, activist, revolutionary. How do you feel about those?
I did all that.
So you're cool with people referring to you that way?
Oh, yeah, I did that. I'm proud. Yeah, sure.
Would you have done anything differently?
You know, I only got, it's a funny thing to say. I only have one regret. When we did the John Sinclair Freedom Rally with John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and I insisted that they keep the ticket price to $3. I think that was the stupidest thing I ever did in my life. If we would have said $10, life would have been entirely different when I got out of prison. But who knows? I thought it was important. Now you realize it doesn't matter if they don't want to see something, they won't go if it's free. If they want to see the Eagles, they'll pay $165 a ticket. So, but we used to think it was important to have things free or as cheap as possible, because a lot of people that we were interested in didn't have any money.
When you went to prison, when you were sentenced to 10 years for 2 marijuana cigarettes, it's hard to believe.
Ouch.
Did you think you were going to get out before your 10 years, or did you go in believing I'm going to end up serving this time?
Oh, I never would believe that. No, I was challenging the constitutionality of the state marijuana laws. I had a constitutional challenge I mounted, and really I thought they wouldn't be able to keep denying me an appeal bond. See, that was the key to my incarceration. Not the sentence per se. I never expected to serve the time. I appealed on constitutional grounds, and this is a hallowed thing in our jurisprudence, supposedly. You were only supposed to not get bond if it was murder or arson or something like that. Well, they wouldn't give me an appeal bond, so that's why I had to do the time. So really, I thought I would get an appeal bond. I thought it would just be a matter of weeks, months. I never expected to do the whole thing. Of course, I never expected John Lennon to come and get me out of prison either. That was a godsend in the most beautiful way.
That changed everything.
Yeah, it got me out.
So you were released 3 days later, right?
Yeah. Beautiful thing.
And we should also mention that you were being wiretapped for a long time. You were being harassed for quite some time. They had a file on you, all of those things.
Richard M. Nixon said the White Panther Party was the most dangerous revolutionary group in the United States, for example.
When I read that,
I'm proud of that. Because you see what happened to him.
Oh, yeah. Do you miss being in the thick of it that way?
No, I just well, I have to say 2 things. I really enjoy being an activist and doing things about the things I was opposed to. But as far as becoming a personality in this field, I just did that out of self-defense because I was in prison and I was trying to get out. And so I had to become a cause celebre and get people to support me because the law was dead set against me, and the legislature and the governor and every authority in the state of Michigan. I was the bugbear,
In this day and age, so social media allows people to reach a lot of people very quickly.
Right.
You reached a lot of people and didn't have any of those resources.
We did this
at
on
that time.
mimeograph machines.
Yeah.
And then we had a rock and roll band that was incredibly exciting, the MC5. And they were fully a part of this. They were, me and Rob Tyner, we were joined at the head, So they were eager to do this as I was eager to do it. So we had a pretty powerful weapon, and SDS never had a rock and roll band, you see.
How do you define success?
Oh, man, I don't know. Success. I don't even think of that.
That is an acceptable answer for sure.
That was WDET's Ann DeLisi speaking with John Sinclair in 2016. John passed away yesterday at the age of 82.
This is The Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. Today, expect scattered showers, wind conditions, gusty wind conditions, a high near 46 degrees. Tomorrow, Thursday, we'll see more rain and it's going to be mostly cloudy, a high around 46. Friday, opening day, there's a chance of rain and snow flurries before 11 a.m. Rain will continue with a high around 45. It'll warm up next week. And speaking of the weather, a powerful storm system spawned one of the country's largest and deadliest tornado outbreaks on April 3rd and April 4th in 1974. My parents were still in high school. It produced 148 twisters from Michigan to Mississippi, as well as one in Canada that destroyed the Windsor Curling Club, killing 9 people. Scientists have learned a lot about tornadoes since then, including how to detect them and give people more time to take cover. Paul Gross is a local meteorologist who worked at Channel 4 for more than 30 years. He told WDET's Pat Batchelor that the biggest advancement in weather forecasting in the last half-century is the Doppler radar.
Before Doppler radar, the radar would show us where rain was falling, but that's all it showed us. And of course it was hail or snow. Again, you'd see that, but it gave you no other information about the structure of a storm. Now, Doppler radar allows us to see the wind inside of a storm. And so we can actually see if there's rotation. If you have, say, 5 storms on the radar and one has a big tornado, we know which one it is because the radar shows us where that rotation is. In my opinion, the single biggest advancement since that outbreak has been Doppler radar, because now we can see the wind inside of the storms instead of just where it's raining or hailing.
And how did it change the way meteorologists warn people about tornadoes?
Well, tornado warnings were at that time issued for 2 reasons. One, mostly because somebody saw a tornado. And second, there is something on radar, it's called a hook echo, where you see kind of a hook in the rain pattern. And with those old radars, if you saw a real clear defined hook on that radar, the meteorologist would know that there was probably a tornado there and they'd issue a tornado warning. But aside from that, there were really a lot of tornadoes, the small and weak ones, that went unwarned because they didn't show that typical storm structure of a strong tornado, and we didn't have the Doppler radar to show us the wind and the rotation inside of that storm. So that's really the biggest thing.
Now, I was 8, almost 9 years old when the outbreak happened, and I clearly remember the tornado warnings on TV from that night. I was down in the basement, which was where you were supposed to be back then. They told you, be in the southwest corner. I also recall being told to open windows to ease the pressure and drive at right angles away from a tornado and all that other kind of stuff. What have we learned about being ready for a tornado since then, and what myths still persist?
Well, first of all, the most important thing is that we have become much better at identifying those types of situations where we think the ingredients are going to come together to give us severe storms and possibly tornadoes. So the tornado watches now are much better than they were then. We have much better ability to identify and give you lead time that this kind of weather could occur later, say a few hours later or just an hour later. But the bottom line is, first of all, we have a better ability to give people advance notice that this type of weather may occur. Second, with the Doppler radars, the tornado warnings are sometimes and frequently issued much farther in advance of a tornado than they used to be. So whereas, again, tornado warnings in the past were mostly issued because somebody saw a tornado, which means it's too late for somebody. Now we're sometimes getting 10, 15 minutes notice of a potential storm with a tornado before that tornado even touches down. And that's huge because the more notice we give people to get to their place of safety, the better.
Does that have a risk of desensitizing people to severe weather alerts?
You raise a very good point there, and that is a big concern of mine because not every storm that has rotation is going to drop a tornado, but every storm with rotation has the potential to drop a tornado. So some tornado warnings now are literally like mini forecasts. Hey, we're seeing a storm with strong rotation. There are no reports of a tornado right now, but this storm could produce a tornado. Get to safety now. Would you rather have that? Or would you rather have a tornado hit your house and then, somebody saw a tornado, so let's now issue a warning? Which one would you rather be? I'd rather have a little higher false alarm rate, but more advance notice.
How much do we still not know about tornadoes, and what would you like to know or need to know at this point?
It's one thing. And the one thing that I want to know and that we don't know is, despite knowing all of the conditions that come together to create the storms that create tornadoes, we still don't know what actually causes that rotation that's up there in the cloud, that mesocyclone. What causes that to suddenly tighten up and extend that funnel to the ground? That's the one thing that we don't know. But with all the Doppler radar technology, and there are some professional storm chasers that are getting additional data for us, I'm hoping that we will, in the scope of my lifetime, at some point know what is the exact mechanism that causes that funnel to extend to the ground and become a tornado. That's the one thing we don't know, and that's the one thing I really want to know.
That was WDET's Pat Batchelor speaking with Channel 4 meteorologist Paul Gross. This is The Metro, and coming up, we'll discuss the Ford House Summer Concert Series. You stay right there. This is The Metro on 1019 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Nick Austin. And as we continue to deal with chilly temperatures in the spring, the summer concert announcements continue to heat up. This week was no exception as the Eleanor and Edsel Ford House announced a series of concerts for the summer. To learn more about the history of the house as well as the concert series, we're joined by Tommy Carr with the Ford House. Tommy, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to have you here also because, Tommy, I got to admit to you, a lot of Fords running around here, if you haven't noticed, in Detroit.
Indeed.
So let's clear up where we're at with this group of Fords. Who are Eleanor and Edsel Ford, and what is the Ford House?
Great question. So Eleanor and Edsel Ford. Edsel was Henry Ford's only child. And the Ford House, a lot of people think when they think Ford House, they think of Fairlane, deservedly so, in Dearborn. But we're actually located on the shoreline of Lake St. Clair, right in Grosse Pointe Shores. And the home will be celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2028. It's a beautiful Cotswold-styled home. They were inspired by the Cotswold villages of England. And at the house, we have tours, educational classes for kids and adults, and then, of course, big, fun public programs like our summer outdoor concert series.
All right. Well, before we get into that concert series, let's learn a little bit more about this house. It's a national landmark. Do you have any interesting facts, or what's the unique thing that people learn about when they go there and like, this is really interesting? You should tell everybody about the Ford House.
Yeah, well, a lot of people actually drive by and think that the gate house is the actual house, which, again, a perfectly understandable thought. But as you drive through that gate and it opens up to a park that's 88 acres, you get to explore the home, which was about 30,000 square feet. There, Edsel and Eleanor raised their 4 kids, who then, of course, went on to spread the wealth and name of the family around the state and internationally. But the house itself is very unique because while it's a historic home and, in a sense, a museum, it feels very much like a home that you're walking through that you might stop in and have coffee with a friend at some point. So it's an interesting mix of that sort of prestige, but really feeling warm and comfortable. Plus, there's tunnels underneath that lead to other places and a lot of fun things that people can experience.
Let me tell you, tunnels are really getting big right now. I love this idea of a big house putting a smaller house out in front to test if there's riffraff. Like, oh, hold on.
Yep.
You don't make it past the small house. You can't get to the big house. You've not proven that you're here for a good time. But speaking of good times, you've got this concert series that's happening at a house. I wouldn't think of throwing concerts just on my front lawn. So how did you guys even start this concert series in the first place?
15 or so years ago, we first teamed up with Detroit Symphony and hosted huge concerts there on the back terrace of the house with the audience lounging on the lawn with the lake right behind them. And it's become something that is just continues to get bigger every year. And now, in the last few years since COVID, we really branched out and started looking at who else can we bring in that will mix up, give us a diverse experience. We try to bring in local talent as often as we can. Every once in a while, we'll pull somebody from somewhere nearby in the Midwest, but it's an experience that is so much fun. 1,500 people come out to each night of the concerts. They can bring their picnics. We have concessions available for sale. They get to explore the grounds and just have a really cool evening in a place that you wouldn't expect to go and listen to, say, a rock concert.
All right. Well, what you got coming up this summer, and how can people find out more?
Yeah. So we have 4 coming up this summer. They're all on Fridays through June and August. One of my favorites to kick us off this year, we have the Gabriel Brass Band, which is a Detroit-based sort of Louisiana brass feel band. They'll be on Friday, June 28th at 7. Our second concert is the Killer Flamingos. I know a lot of listeners are probably familiar with them. One of the most popular party bands in the state. So they'll be with us on Friday, July 19th at 7. We have the Dave Hamilton Band, which is bringing us a sort of Motown-inspired concert on Friday, August 9th at 7. And then we're wrapping up the concert series with the Michigan Philharmonic on Friday, August 23rd at 6:30, because, you know, as the time changes, it gets darker a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
And the Michigan Phil is going to be doing a concert called Car Tunes, C-A-R Tunes. And that's going to be music inspired by famous Hollywood cars. So you'll hear Back to the Future and Grease, a lot of Beach Boys, and just a lot of like celebration of the automobile industry, which of course ties back to Edsel Ford.
Yeah, no, all good stuff there. All right. So the last question, the most important one that I'm sure people who love music want to know, especially for their homes. Do the neighbors ever complain about all the noise, and how do you get them to not complain if they don't? What's the strategy here?
No, we have great neighbors along Lakeshore Road, and they have been fantastic with us. We invite them over at the beginning of every season. Yep. Invite them in, check it out, let them know what's going to be going on, and usually they come and celebrate with us.
All right. Well, that is going to do it. We're going to have to check that out. And Tommy Carr with the Ford House, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. The Ford House Summer Concert Series kicks off on Friday, June 28th, as Tommy mentioned, with the Detroit-based Gabriel Brass Band. More information is available at fordhouse.org.
This is the Metro on 101.9 WDET-FM. You just heard from Nick Austin, and learning all about what's going on at the Ford House this summer, looking for music and fun vibes. And speaking of music, jazz and its roots come from the Black community in the late 19th and early 20th centuries in the South. New Orleans, to be specific, is the genre's birthplace. And as the sound spread throughout the South, the Great Migration and the promise of a better life brought that sound to the North. Detroit became a mini haven for jazz and expanding sound. A new film titled The Best of the Best, Jazz from Detroit, wants to remind audiences and lovers of jazz of the rich history and artists that Detroit has shared with the world. Audiences will travel through time, exploring the intersection of Detroit jazz from the importance of the Great Migration to Black Bottom and beyond. The documentary film will premiere at the Freep Film Festival April 13th and April 14th. Joining us now on the Metro is Mark Stryker. He is a journalist, an author, and a filmmaker. He is also a co-producer of The Best of the Best, Jazz from Detroit doc. Mark, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
Awesome. And just talking to another journalist, love that. But, thinking about jazz music, and it means so much to Detroiters, and an important aspect of the culture here is passing it down to others, mentorship, sharing that knowledge. I want to play this clip before we get started from the documentary of Detroit jazz musician Rodney Whitaker saying just that.
In Detroit, you are instilled with this idea that is a part of your mission to mentor other folks from the time you first start playing. It is like the each one teach one philosophy is instilled in you by the time you're 15 years old.
And I love that so much, listening to Rodney Whitaker chat. I've had opportunities to speak with him in the past, and that's one of the things that he really hit on is this spreading that knowledge, expanding that culture to new generations, like with his mentee, India Owens. So why do you think that sharing and teaching others about jazz and not just playing is so important to Detroit musicians?
Well, it's the result of some very special people that have contributed to our heritage here. That starts with Barry Harris, a great pianist and sort of a bebop professor in the 1950s who basically ran a Socratic workshop here in Detroit on the west side of Detroit out of his house. And every important jazz musician essentially that came up in the 1950s came through Barry's academy. So we're talking about people like the trumpeter Donald Byrd or the bass player Paul Chambers or the bass player Doug Watkins and then the saxophonist Charles McPherson and Joe Henderson and Roy Brooks, the drummer. You name it, they came through Barry's academy. And by the way, so did visiting stars from out of town like John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Sonny Clark. Whenever they would come to Detroit, they would go by Barry's house too, pull up a chair and say, "Hey, maestro, what are you working on?" And so Barry, who was spent a good 10 years as a working pro and a mentor in Detroit from 1950 to 1960, really builds into our community this DNA of mentorship. And that baton of mentorship then gets picked up by Marcus Belgrave, the great trumpeter in the 1970s and beyond, and his students become very famous. Jerry Allen, the pianist, Bob Hurst, the bassist, Rodney Whitaker, Regina Carter, Kareem Riggins. These are all people that come through the academy of Marcus Belgrave. And then that baton gets passed to many others, but Rodney Whitaker today is sort of Detroit's jazz mentor-in-chief. And I think the other thing that's important about all this is that, you know, over the last 60 years or so, as Detroit declined in economic power and lost population, the question becomes, well, how did Detroit continue to produce so many great jazz musicians? You know, we were a power through the middle of the 20th century, both as a city and as a producer of jazz talent. But that continues even as the city declines. And so, you know, mentorship becomes a crucial component in keeping our tradition and legacy going.
So I know that you've been a culture writer, especially with a focus on jazz for your career, and you chose this topic because that, you know, when you were researching and working throughout your years, what were some things that you were finding out that made you say this needs to be told to the world?
Well, I think, you know, if you're a jazz person, and I grew up as a jazz musician, and then came into journalism, you are always aware from the beginning, you begin to understand, Kenny Burrell, he's from Detroit, and Paul Chambers, he's from Detroit. Oh, Ron Carter, he's also from Detroit. Oh, you know, so you begin to, the Jones brothers, Hank, Thad, and Elvin, they're from Detroit. So you begin to see this. But when I moved here to work for the Detroit Free Press in the middle 90s, once I got here, I really began to understand just how deep and profound the legacy was here. And you move here and you begin then to put the pieces together and start asking questions about, well, how did this happen? What were the social, cultural, economic conditions in the city that led to this explosion in the middle of the 20th century? And I began talking to interviewing people like Tommy Flanagan, Barry Harris, and Hank Jones, and Joe Henderson, and beginning to put together the pieces that became a book that I published in 2019 called Jazz from Detroit, University of Michigan Press. And about a year after that, I was giving a couple of talks about my book in Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. And an old friend of mine said, "Have you ever thought about making a documentary about your book?" And I said, "No, but that's a great idea." And she said, "You know, I got these friends in New York. They're filmmakers. That's what they do." She introduced us, Daniel Lowenthal, who is the director and editor of the film, Roberta Friedman, who's a co-producer. We began talking, and 4 years later, with their help, because remember, I'm an author, journalist, I'm not a filmmaker until right now, we began to put the film together and focused on telling this broad story.
And I think right now, as I'm chatting with you, Marcus, I heard a little bit of, you're a musician, a jazz musician, and you move into Detroit mid-'90s. You're working in the field, in the scene. and you're finding all this information, this rich history, this rich knowledge. Being a musician yourself, what did it feel like discovering these things for the first time and understanding and finding out where some of these sounds that you love are coming from?
That's a very deep question, and I paused there because just to sort of take that in.
Well, I appreciate you just not rattling off the handle the first thing that came to mind. So good. We'll give you the pause.
It's been a thrill of a lifetime to sit down with a Joe Henderson or a Hank Jones when he's 90 or late 80s, or to spend time with a musician as profound as Ron Carter and begin to understand how they think about the music on the bandstand. That's life-changing stuff for me, and it's, as you all know, it's the best thing about what we do is we get to interact with people that are on such a high level in their fields and have such a rarefied sense of humanity, because you have to play this music at that level. And so you walk away from those experiences yourself changed. I have much greater insight into the music, and I think combining that with the skills of a storyteller that we have as journalists, I'm able to take that information and put it back out to readers, both readers with the written word and now viewers for the film, and help them understand how these people think and help them understand what's special about the music. And I try and take people onto the bandstand and put them right there in the center of the band and have them experience what the musicians are experiencing, and therefore getting this sort of emotional lift. It's a thrill to have had the privilege of writing that book, and now especially making this documentary.
Mark, I will say, just personally learning about the legacy of jazz, especially here in the city of Detroit, I started to learn a lot about it through the Carr Center and its teachings about jazz in general, and just learning about Rodney Whitaker and who he was and the legacy that he comes from and the legacy that he's building behind him. And I just think about the Great Migration and how a lot of that music, most of it came in from the South up to the North through, looking for jobs or looking for family or disconnection in general. In what way do you see, or what way did that shape the sound of Detroit's jazz?
Well, it's a huge influence, and we from the very beginning talked about, when we were making this film, that we wanted to embed the story of the music and the musicians within the trajectory of Detroit's history, and particularly within the struggles and triumphs of the African American community. I mean, this is music of Black culture. And so we have tried to tie the history of the city to the music at every step. And, the Great Migration brings hundreds of thousands of African Americans to the north and to Detroit, where they are attracted by the auto industry. The auto industry is creating some of the best jobs in the country, highest wages in the country for African Americans. That produces an economically sufficient, self-sufficient African American community that creates Black Bottom, and particularly really Paradise Valley, the economic center of the African American community, the hotels, restaurants, bars. That creates work for musicians, an active nightlife. You combine that with the great music education in the Detroit public schools, which, let's remember, it's seeded not only Motown and Detroit jazz, but orchestras all over the country, world-renowned music education in the Detroit public schools at the middle of the 20th century. You combine the formal education in the schools with the informal education of the street, with Barry Harris teaching, and these young students are able to apply that knowledge at night in the thriving club scene. That is a powerful combination of social, cultural, economic elements that you don't get in other cities. So people ask me, why Detroit? Well, it's a complicated question, but it has to do with all of these things. What happened in Detroit is not an accident. What happened is a result of a particular culture, particular people in a particular city at a particular time with particular individuals, right? And that is it's the layers of this story to me that are so fascinating, and that we tried to get at to the best we could in this documentary. I have to say, our director, Daniel Lowenthal, was very, very good at creating a narrative flow that flows from the city to the music, to the city, to the music, to this person. And we hope that we've created a portrait of a city so that you learn not only what's special about Elvin Jones as a drummer, but also the city of Detroit itself becomes a character, we hope, in the film.
I love that. It's the perfect way to end the conversation. Mark Stryker, a co-producer of the best, jazz from Detroit and former arts reporter and critic, classical music, jazz, visual arts with the Detroit Free Press. You can see this film. It's going to be premiering at the Detroit Free Film Festival, April 13th and April 14th. We'll have more information on our website. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the Metro and sharing this information.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to be here.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. When we return, we'll check in on what's happening later at noon within the groove, right here on 101.9 WDET. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Nick Austin.
And I'm Tia Graham. Just taking a look at the weather forecast. Of course, it's going to be scattered showers today, a high around 46 degrees. Tomorrow, we'll see more rain. It's going to be cloudy, 46 degrees. And opening day, Friday, expect a chance of rain, maybe snow flurries as well, a high around 45 degrees. We'll see that warm up starting next week, Monday, partly sunny, a high of 64. So we just have to get through the weekend. We just got to make it through.
Is that it? You say that with a lot of confidence, because I don't know. The way the weather's been going I don't know if I'd have as much confidence as you there, Tia.
You know,
unless you know something I don't know.
I don't know anything that you don't know right now about the weather.
Maybe you got like a groundhog that you keep at home or something that's like feeding you some new information. Like Poxitani Bill has nothing on me.
No, just been following Paul Gross, like Pat Batchelor.
All right, well, that's smart. We did speak with Pat Batchelor, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Opening day, of course, is always like a holiday here in Detroit, so I know you're looking forward to that, especially with the team that looks like they're kind of winning. So
the Detroit Tigers play the New York Mets tonight. They're off to a good start, winning their first 4 games of the season. I'm not saying anything. It's a long season, 100+ games, but starting off 4-0. Pretty good.
I know. 158 to go. Let's see what happens.
They could lose all the rest. But you know what? Plausible. They start off great. They're starting off great. Bullpen looks great.
Bullpen looks great. Like, Tia's getting here doing the scouting report. That's right. She's like, I haven't seen a left-hander come out of the bullpen for the Tigers like that since Frank Tanana back in 6 or
whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, I love it. I'm into baseball this year. Yeah. Really feel like the Tigers are going to at least show up. At least the Red Wings. Yeah.
Well, everybody knows Frank Tanana stopped playing in the early 90s. But getting off of that and getting into the groove coming up at noon with Ryan Patrick Hooper. Ryan, what you got for us?
I was just so excited to have Mark Stryker in here. Yeah. What a legend. And he's like in the groove is, people often say, what's in the water? What's in the air? Why is Detroit such a great music city? It's not that mystical. It was education, the Great Migration, and the Black Church, people. Those were the 3 reasons.
That's it. That's all.
And, we always celebrate that quite a bit here on In the Groove. I got a ton of new music. We're also going to go deep into the soul archives with some Sly and the Family Stone, a little bit of Herbie Hancock. We're going to cover a lot of musical ground. All rhythm, no algorithm coming up on In the Groove. Why do you guys got to laugh at me every time I come on here and say something cool?
I mean, stop saying cool stuff. That's going to do it for the Metro, April 3rd edition. You can listen to recent episodes online at WDET.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
The show is produced by Sam Corey, David Lyons, and Jack Philbrandt, and our technical director is Nate Bender.
The Metro is a WDET production, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University. If you like what you hear and want to support the Metro, consider becoming a member at WDET.org/donate.
This is WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Nick, we need some type of cool phrase or slogan or something.
We'll get Ryan to make one for us.
Yeah.
WDET is supported by the College of Business Administration at University of Detroit Mercy. UDM is offering a new master's degree in ethical leadership focused on sustainable, ethical, and inclusive problem solving. More information at business.udmercy.edu.